June 1944, Normandy, France. The rain had finally stopped just before dawn, leaving the earth heavy and soaked. The air was thick with the smell of wet mud, lingering smoke, and the sharp, metallic temps of Iron Sergeant Thomas Allais, or Tom as his friends called him, adjusted the stiff strap of his M1 Garand rifle. He peered over the shattered hedgerows that framed the outskirts of the town of Saint. What was once a peaceful, rolling French countryside was now a brutal canvas of craters, the charred skeletons of farmhouses, and the twisted, rusting metal of war machines. Tom was only 26, but the relentless grind of the war had carved years onto his face. His skin was streaked with dirt and grime, and his eyes were sunken, hollowed out by weeks of little to no sleep. It had been 3 weeks since he'd stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day, and every single day that followed had felt like borrowed time, a gift he wasn't sure he deserved. He instinctively reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers finding the familiar crisp edges of a folded letter. He'd written it the night before, pouring his thoughts onto the thin paper, but he hadn't sent it. He couldn't bring himself to. Before all this, before the mud and the blood, Tom was a schoolteacher back in a small town in Ohio. The irony wasn't lost on him. He used to teach history. He remembered the day the news of Pearl Harbor crackled over the radio in his classroom. He stood there, silent, as his students watched him, their young faces reflecting a dawning realization that the world they knew had just been irrevocably altered. He enlisted a week later, now, crouched in the Normandy mud. A dark thought crossed his mind. He wondered if, someday, one of his own students would read about this very battle in a history textbook. Would they ever be able to grasp the true costs of these printed words? Would they understand the fear, the sacrifice, the humanity that was lost in these fields? 5 minutes. The sharp voice of Lieutenant Parker cut through the morning stillness, jolting Tom back to the present. Around him, the men of his platoon began their final checks, the metallic clicks and clacks of their weapons a somber ritual. Some men moved their lips in silent prayer. Others just stared blankly ahead, their eyes fixed on a future that was measured in minutes, not years. Private Eddie Morales, a kid barely 19 years old, sat beside Tom, his hands trembling so hard he had to clench them into fists. "You scared, kid?" Tom asked, his voice low and steady. Eddie gave a small, jerky nod, his eyes wide. "Yeah," he whispered, "but I don't want to die without doing something that matters." Tom's expression softened. He placed a firm, reassuring hand on the young private's shoulder. "Just stay close to me," he said. "That's all that matters right now. We get through this together." Then, the world exploded. The friendly artillery barrage began, and the ground beneath them shook like an angry, waking beast. The sky above was torn apart by the thunderous roar of shells screaming overhead, a symphony of destruction aimed at the German lines. "Move out!" Parker yelled. The men surged forward, advancing through the labyrinth of hedgerows. Every step was a gamble, every shadow a potential hiding spot for the enemy. Suddenly, the air was ripped apart by the distinctive, terrifying chatter of a German machine gun, an MG-42. "Down!" Tom roared, diving face first into the cold, wet mud. A stream of bullets snapped and whizzed just inches above their heads, tearing through the leaves and branches. To Tom's left, a man cried out, a sharp, choked scream that was abruptly cut short. Then, silence from that direction. In the chaos, time itself seemed to dissolve. Tom crawled forward, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his ears ringing from the constant explosions. The acrid smell of burnt gunpowder and the coppery scent of blood filled his nostrils, a perfume of battle he knew he'd never forget. He reached the relative safety of a low stone wall and risked a quick peek over the top. There, nestled in a collapsed section of a barn, he saw the machine gun nest, spitting death. He ducked back down and signaled to Lieutenant Parker, pointing out the target. Parker nodded. Two of the men near him pulled the pins on their grenades. With practiced motions, they lobbed them in high arcs toward the German position. The explosions were brutally brief, a violent cough of smoke and shrapnel. And then, the machine gun fell silent. "Move. Let's go." The order came and they were up again, pushing forward through the debris-strewn fields toward St. El. It was in the ruins on the edge of town that he saw her. He and Eddie were clearing a bombed-out bakery, the sweet smell of burnt sugar strangely mingling with the stench of war. As they rounded a collapsed wall, they froze. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, was huddled in a corner, clutching a dirty, one-eyed teddy bear. Her face was smudged with soot, and her eyes were wide with a terror that went beyond tears. She wore a simple, torn dress and was covered in dust. She didn't scream or cry. She just stared, silent and frozen. Tom slowly lowered his rifle, holding up a hand to stop Eddie. He approached her cautiously, as if approaching a frightened deer. He knelt down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." He reached into his ration pack and pulled out a bar of chocolate, something he'd been saving. He held it out to her. The girl's eyes flickered from his face to the chocolate bar, then back again. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out a small, trembling hand and took it. Suddenly, the wall behind her groaned, and a large chunk of stone and plaster began to shift. Without a second thought, Tom lunged forward, grabbing the girl and pulling her back, just as the debris crashed down right where she had been sitting. She let out a small gasp and clung to him, burying her face in his jacket. He held her for a moment, his heart racing. He could feel her small body shaken against his. This was what mattered, not the grand strategies, not the lines on a map. This small, fragile life. He learned her name was Cece. She had been separated from her parents during the bombing. Using his high school French, Tom managed to calm her down, promising they would help her find them. For the rest of the day, as they moved cautiously through the shattered streets of Santel, Cecil stayed close to Tom. She held his hand, her tiny grip a stark contrast to the heavy rifle he carried in the other. Her presence changed the dynamic of the squad. The men, hardened by weeks of fighting, softened around her. They shared their meager rations, offered her water from their canteens. She was a symbol, a fragile flicker of innocence in a world gone mad. That evening, they found a makeshift refugee camp set up by the Red Cross in a partially intact church. As they approached, a woman cried out, "Cecil!" A moment later, the girl was swept up in the arms of her weeping mother. The reunion was a powerful, beautiful scene amidst so much ugliness. Cecil's father, a man with tired but grateful eyes, grabbed Tom's hand and shook it, repeating "Merci, merci, Messia" over and over again. As Tom and Eddie walked away, back towards the front line, Eddie turned to him. "You know, Sergeant," he said, his voice quiet. "What you said this morning about doing something that matters, I think we just did." Tom looked back at the church, at the silhouette of a family for the first time in a long time. A genuine smile touched his lips. He thought about the letter in his pocket. He still wouldn't send it. Not yet, but now, he felt like he had a new story to add to it. A story not just of war, but of hope. He realized that history isn't just made in the thunder of cannons and the fall of cities. It's also made in the small acts of kindness, in the moments you choose to save a life instead of taking one. And in that moment, under a bruised Normandy sky, the history teacher from Ohio understood his lesson more profoundly than ever before. The roar of the engines had become a constant, a dull thrum that lived in your bones. 4 weeks, we'd been pushing through the hedgerows of Normandy, a green hell of tangled roots and hidden machine gun nests. My name is Dom, and back home in Ohio, I was a history teacher. Here, I was just another GI, another face in a sea of olive drab, trying to keep my friend Eddie from telling another one of his terrible jokes. He'd say it kept our spirits up. I'd say it was just a way to drown out the noise. By afternoon on that day in July 1944, we finally broke through to the outskirts of St. Lay, but there was no cheering, no sense of victory. The town was a ghost. It wasn't just damaged, it was innocent. Buildings were skeletal fingers clawing at a gray sky, their windows like vacant ice. The streets were choked with rubble, a graveyard of stone and splintered wood. It was a silence filled with the echoes of screams. That's when I saw her, standing near what was once a bakery. A small girl, no older than 12. Her dress was a mess of dust and ash, and she was clutching a doll that was missing an arm and an eye. She just stood there, staring at us as we passed. Her eyes weren't filled with fear or anger. but with an emptiness that was far more terrifying. They were old eyes and a young face. Eyes that had seen the end of the world. Most of the guys just marched past, their faces grim, focused on the road ahead. But I couldn't premeditate. Donned my boots, crunching on shattered glass. Eddie gave me a look, but I just shook my head. I knelt down, trying to make myself smaller, less of a threat. "It's okay," I said softly. "We won't hurt you." The words were useless, of course. She didn't speak English, but kindness, I've learned, has its own language. She watched me for a long moment, then held out a small, grimy piece of folded paper. I took it from her. It was a letter, written in a delicate French script. My high school French was rusty, but I could make out the words. "To my husband," it began. "If I do not survive, tell our daughter that I loved her more than life itself." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I looked from the letter to the girl, and then back again. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. I promised myself, right then and there, that if I made it through this, I would never forget her face. That night, hell came to visit. The Germans launched a counterattack, desperate to hold the town. The darkness was torn apart by flares, casting a sickly, dancing light over the ruins, turning night into a horrifying, artificial day. The ground trembled as their tanks, the dreaded panzers, rolled through the streets. Their engines roared like primeval monsters, a sound designed to break your spirit before their shells broke your body. "Hold the line." "Our sergeant," Parker screamed over the din. The order was almost absurd. "What line?" We were scattered among the ruins, fighting from piles of rubble that used to be someone's home. I fired my M1 Garand until the barrel was too hot to touch. The asterisk ping asterisk of the empty clip, a frantic metronome in the symphony of destruction. Eddie was right beside me, a constant presence. He was yelling, firing, a wild grin on his face that was part courage, part terror. And then, a shell screamed down. An explosion, deafening and final, threw me against a wall. When the smoke and dust cleared, I pushed myself up. My ears were ringing. The world was a blurry mess. I looked over to where Eddie had been. There was just a crater. Nothing else. He was gone. Just gone. I screamed his name again and again, but my voice was swallowed by the war. The battle didn't pause. The monsters didn't care. Hours later, an eerie silence fell. The German attack had been repulsed. The street was quiet again, but it was a heavy, mournful silence, punctuated only by the soft moans of the wounded. I sat with my back against a broken wall, the cold stone seeping into my bones. I was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my soul and worked its way out. My hands fumbled in my pocket, and I pulled out the letter I had started writing to my wife, Anna. An unsent letter, just like the one the little girl had given me. My own words stared back at me. "Dear Anna," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I made it home. But if not, I want you to know that every step I took here was for you, and for the world we hope to build for our son." I thought about Eddie, who would never see his home again. He was a boy, really. We all were. Boys who should have been playing baseball or worrying about exams, now playing this deadly game. "If I don't come back," my letter continued, "tell our son that his father believed that peace was worth fighting for." Did I still believe that? In that moment, surrounded by death, I wasn't so sure. I folded the letter and put it back in my jacket, next to the one from the French woman. 2 letters, 2 testaments to love in a world of hate. By the end of July, St. Lay was officially liberated. Victory. That's what they called it. The German grip on Normandy was broken, and the road to Paris was open. But as we marched through the liberated town, it felt more like a funeral procession. The cost was written on every broken stone and every pile of rubble. Before we shipped out, I had to go back. I walked to the spot where the bakery had been. The girl was gone. I don't know what happened to her, and maybe it's better than I don't. But lying on a pile of bricks was the torn doll. Grenada picked it up its one remaining button eye, seeming to stare right through me. I gently placed it on the highest point of the rubble, a small, sad monument in a city of them. I survived the war. I don't know why me and not Eddie. or the countless others. There's no logic to it. In 1945, I went home to Ohio, to Anna and my son. I was thinner, quieter. A piece of me was still buried in the mud of France. I went back to teaching history, but I couldn't teach it the same way. The dates and battles, the grand strategies, they suddenly felt hollow. So I told my students about the real history. I told them about Eddie, the funny kid from Brooklyn who never got to go home. I told them about a little girl in a dusty dress in St. Blay, who had lost everything but still had the strength to hand a letter to a stranger. I told them about promises made in the dark and letters that served as a final connection to a life that was about to be extinguished. And every year, on June 6, the anniversary of D-Day, when my family is asleep, I take out that old, worn letter I started writing to Anna. I don't read it anymore. I don't have to. I just hold Italiano, and I remember the cost. Because history isn't just about the victors or the vanquished. It's not about maps and arrows. It's about people. It's about their stories. And it's our duty never to forget them. Thank you for listening.